Hello there. Welcome to my review of the Rockford Files Season 3, Episode 2, The Oracle Wore a Cashmere Suit, written by David Chase and directed by Russ Mabry. The episode begins at the beach outside Rockford's trailer, where the police are looking for something and it's preventing Jim from getting his beauty sleep. Jim goes to complain and encounters Robert Webber's Roman Clementi, who, it's quickly revealed, is a psychic helping police find a missing couple, one of whom he's had a vision of being dead. We also get a Columbo connection in this scene, as the detective assisting Clementi is played by John Furlong, who appears as the control booth operator in Make Me a Perfect Murder, and who has already appeared in small roles in the Rockford Files, in The £4 Brick and The Deep Blue Sleep. Rocky arrives wanting Jim's help with some gardening, and Rocky recognises Clementi from Johnny Carson.
Oh man, is he a quack. He's stuffed full of beans and a cheap burrito.
It turns out Jim was following the same couple before they disappeared, and so he's naturally suspicious of this coincidence. This is another novel setup for the show, and is almost certainly inspired by the rise in phony psychics on TV in the 70s. Uri Geller famously appeared on Johnny Carson in 1973, and failed to perform, due to Carson being an amateur magician who was able to ask fellow magician and psychic debunker James Randi how to ensure that the tests laid out for Geller were incorruptible.
I was asked to help prevent any trickery.
We just got some things together here. And
I told them to provide their own props and not to let Geller or his people anywhere near them.
And while this wasn't the first time a fake psychic was used as the plot of a detective story, it was the first time that I could find that introducing them as a police helper with an investigation occurred. Something which has now become a staple episode on many long-running detective shows, such as the classic Monk episode.
Did he tell you? He arrested me 3 times. Bunco and fraud. You always thought I was a quack, didn't you?
Or the show Psych, where the whole premise is the main character pretends to be psychic, so the police will believe his very unpsychic deductions.
Everything's gonna be okay. I'm a psychic.
He's not really a psychic.
Don't eat the chicken.
But he plays one for the police.
It was another bold move for the show when belief in the paranormal was at a high point. Unfortunately, it wasn't able to influence the cultural landscape, as many real-life psychic fraudsters claimed to have information on criminal investigations that turned out to be dangerous bunkum.
The guy was dark-skinned, had real long, dark hair, and strange enough Hispanic, but he had dreadlocks.
Then Sylvia Brown confirmed their worst fears.
Is he still with us?
Thankfully, Sean Hornbeck was found last week alive and well. His alleged abductor, Michael Devlin, is not Hispanic, and he didn't have dreadlocks at the time of the abduction.
Hearing that was one of the hardest things we ever had to hear.
The search for Sean was diverted, according to his parents, based on the misinformation Brown had given.
What's really interesting in this episode is that Rocky is immediately skeptical, which you wouldn't naturally expect. However, Dennis arrives with Clementi, who claims to know Jim has a connection to the couple after shaking hands with him.
What'd you do, Mr. Clementi? Take a pair of my socks off the line and rub them together?
This leads to a trip to the station where Jim has to recount his involvement to new character, James Lewis's Lieutenant Doug Chapman.
This Joker comes along reading his tea leaves.
This Joker was very helpful to the Chicago PD.
Chapman is instantly established as a grumpy, antagonistic character who completely believes Clementi's gift. So we not only know he's an idiot, but also he's going to be a thorn in Rockford's side. It's also made clear what Clementi's motivation is. Money. Any way he can grift it.
Yeah, well, the new book is going to hit the stands in about 12 weeks. You're dragging your feet, Ben.
Jim is furious to discover Clementi has dropped his name to the press as an unwilling informant, and even more angry when he gets set on in his trailer by some thugs.
And I personally gave Rick $80,000 to score us some coke.
Just tell us, where is our 80 G's?
Luckily, Jim manages to get away, but by the time he reports it to Dennis, Clementi is already there, having had a vision of the money and the drugs. Maybe he is genuine. Beth certainly seems convinced, but Jim thinks it's a coincidence. Of course, it's not, but we aren't yet told how he's doing it. And this is how the phony psychic con works. Very much like a magician, if a magician wasn't willing to tell you what they're doing, isn't really magic. This spurs Jim on to investigate further, and so he tracks down an employee of the man who originally hired him, Barry Silverstein.
Your boss, Les Goodwin, hired me a few weeks ago for a surveillance on Rick Richards and Allison Curry.
Jim is angry he was put on a drug case without being told, as he knows how much trouble it can bring. Silverstein is very open about how the music industry basically runs on drugs, and is able to point him towards one of Jim's assailants, Ray Ochoa.
Unfortunately, dope is the lubricant that keeps the great wheel turning.
Jim picks up a tail as he's leaving, but is able to pull a switcheroo on him and finds that he works for Clementi, meaning that Rockford's been set up from the start. He finds his car and his trailer has been bugged, and this discovery is beautifully telegraphed, as in an earlier scene we see Jim accidentally sit on his sunglasses. Which seems like just more Rockford bad luck at the time, but then here it helps him confirm someone else had been in his car and moved his stuff around. It also means that it wasn't mere coincidence that Clementi saw so much detail, and, like any trick, is only clever until you know how it's done. With a new target, Jim follows Clementi to a garage where his team are forensically inspecting the missing couple's car, a team which includes legendary character actor James Hong. Someone who has appeared in so many roles in his 80-year career, I won't even attempt to list them here, but perhaps this brief compilation will give you an idea. It turns out Clementi has been using all the latest in science and technology to pretend to be psychic, but still remains firm on his own abilities, despite being busted by Rockford.
No, it's incredible. This morning I had an image that you had something you wanted to tell me.
Who accuses him of having a plant in the police station and goes on to break down every element of Clementi's con. So much for lucky guesses. Rockford introduces Clementi to Ochoa, who gives him the same treatment he gave Jim, and lets him know that he wasn't jealous of Rick for stealing the missing girl, Allison, but it was actually Silverstein who was broken up over their breakup.
He was always moaning how Rick had turned her into a garbage bag.
Before Jim can escort Clementi to the cops to clear his name with them, Clementi flees, but Jim tracks him down to the location where Rick's car was found. It seems Clementi is a pretty good detective without the psychic facade, but uses his quick brain to scam people for more money than he could make as a PI. Unfortunately, he's about as sure-footed as Columbo, and Clementi takes a fall, knocking himself out. When Jim fetches the cops, Clementi refuses to drop his act, claiming small victories where he can.
I remember somebody saying that the corpses would be found near a body of water. Water tanks don't count.
Before accusing Jim of killing the couple. Obviously, this is a scripted show, but it does reveal how certain psychic scams work, by making broad statements and then pivoting closer towards them or further away from them, depending on how accurate they turn out to be. Using a quick mind to point towards a success and away from failure. He does bring up how Rockford has been suffering from poison oak for a few days now, suggesting that he got it from when he hid the bodies. And while this isn't quite enough for the cops to arrest Jim, it does allow him to work out where he got it from. It's the broken-hearted Barry Silverstein, who tries to take off and take Rockford with him before Jim manages to nab him. In the epilogue, as Jim tries to track down the missing $80,000 he thinks Clementi stole, we discover who Clementi's police mole is.
I believe a Mr. Roman Clementi is there in your studio.
And is able to then turn his theft into a PR stunt.
A safety deposit box? No, it's a shoebox. No, it's a safety deposit box.
His mole is played by Bonnie Bartlett, who in real life is married to William Daniels, who was due to play the Clementi role until he broke his arm. I'm glad Webber was able to return despite the unfortunate circumstances, and that he was able to survive the whole episode this time, as he's perfect as the slick, fast-talking and quick-witted scam psychic. He's completely convincing as he leaves the cops on the merry dance, and even has Rockford confused about how he's doing it at first. The mystery itself takes a bit of a backseat to the interplay between the two men, but that actually works really well, as it's still a compelling mystery that needs to be solved. It would have been nice to see the two missing characters while they were still alive to add some emotional connection to them, but it's not a huge detraction from what is a strong episode overall. It's another one you wish were longer, but is probably better for being the length it is. I think they could have saved the final coda, which I won't spoil as it's a great button on the episode, for a follow-up episode with Clementi returning. But as it looks like there was no intention to have the character come back, I'm glad it's in there. All in all, another very strong episode at the start of the season in a show that really does seem to go from strength to strength. Easily another 5 out of 5 for me. Thank you. Goodbye.